In this episode, we'll continue to improve your understanding of the game and your skill. So today I'm gonna tell you about such things as micro and macro in Mobile Legends. We won't waste time in vain. Let's go. I will start with what micro and macro game or micro and macro control really is. Everyone calls it differently, but the meaning doesn't change. First of all, I will share with you my opinion what micro and macro consists of. Then I will give you some advices on what to pay attention to in order to bring your micro and macro to the desired level, and at the end of this episode you will learn how and when they affect your rank and why. Let's move on. In fact, both concepts are broader and consist of much more than just speed and accuracy of using skills if you're talking about micro, as well as more than efficiency of rotations if we are talking about macro. Micro game is a lot of quick decisions that you make based on the situation on the battlefield, in order to gain some advantage over the enemy hero or over the enemy team as a whole. There are many things that can be related to this. For example, how well you feel the damage you receive and inflict on enemies. I'm sure each of you, fighting 1 versus 1 on the lane or in mass battles, repeatedly overestimated your abilities because of what you didn't finish off the enemy or simply die. Or on the contrary, have been in situations where the enemy is trying to kill you, not realizing that in fact he already lost. Everyone's situation is different, of course. Different levels, different HP amounts, attack and defense scores, and it all changes endlessly. To learn how to correctly assess the damage you receive and inflict, you should always pay attention to the mentioned things, see what you get in the output, and most importantly, to remember it. For example, can Eudora kill full HP Saber who has Athena's shield and Rose Golden Meteor? Or will Lila with full item build kill Balmond before he will get to her? Such feelings as there will be enough damage or there won't be enough damage allow you to kill your enemies more often than being killed by them instead. The ability to adapt quickly in each match and properly assess the damage you receive and inflict is important enough, despite the fact that this is very simple basic thing. The next point I relate to micro is the controlling of the cooldowns. I mean cooldowns of your allies and enemy skills. Of course, you can't keep all the skills in your head, but at least the ultimates are worth controlling. Let's imagine, you're playing against Pharsa, which does a lot of damage and is a dangerous enemy. More often than not, she decides the outcome of a battle, because she can easily kill your assassin as well as marksman, using a light and fast combo. But imagine that there happens a situation where Pharsa has used her ultimate recently, for example 10 seconds ago. And if you know that Pharsa's ultimate skill cooldown at max skill level is 38 seconds, which can be lowered to about 28 seconds when taking into account cooldown bonuses from items and emblems, it makes you free to begin a battle in this certain situation, which will be obviously less dangerous than previous battles. And at the same time, you will have some advantage already. If you're watching this video and you've just started playing, I advise you simply remember this info and come back to it in a couple of thousand matches, because you can't learn everything at once. I personally only after more than 6,000 matches started to get into the soul, and it's really important. Of course, we shouldn't forget about the cooldowns of the battle spells as well as about items with active skills. To learn the cooldown of Flicker, Flame Shot or Petrify, memorize the cooldown of Wind of Nature or Winter Truncheon and time them on the game timer. It's pretty easy at absolutely any stage of the game, even for beginners. By the way, there is a video about this kind of thing, the typical mistakes we make. Be sure to check it out, I added it to the tooltips and video description. The next point that I relate to micro is your positioning in battles. Everyone asks, how do I learn good positioning? I don't know how to position. Really guys, positioning isn't something that can't be understood. To position properly, keep in mind your abilities to save from an enemy or, on the contrary, not to let him go, as well as about the same abilities of your allies and enemies. Try to understand who is capable of what. Don't forget in battles about where most dangerous enemies are. Don't rush to use the skills which can help you to survive in the case of threat. And the last point, just follow the ground rules, such as tank and fighter are in front, assassin is somewhere on the side, out of enemy sight, mage and marksman a little behind the tank and fighter, that's all. The next aspect of micro I want to tell you about is exactly what most people used to call micro: speed, accuracy and efficiency of the skills you use. For example, the speed of Paquita's combo, the accuracy of Franco's hook, or the effectiveness of Petrify in Yujon's combo. This all relates to your mechanic skills. This is everything that's done by your hands and everything which comes with experience. So, in order to improve your micro in this regard, learn to play difficult heroes like Fanny, Gashan, Lancelot and so on. Spam them in the training camp, because if you master them to a good level, you will master almost everything you need for speed, accuracy and efficiency. Of course, you can try other, less difficult heroes, for example Paquita or Cho. In addition to micro relates how you plan to outplay your opponent in the very near future and at what expense. For example, give a combo using flicker to kill an enemy or kill him without using it. Or get into the bush and pretend you aren't there, but in fact you are, and kill your enemy too. The second example may sound strange, but it works. The last thing I relate to micro is how well the player prioritizes his enemies. I mean, if player using Hayabusa focuses on the enemy roamer instead of killing mage, marksman or assassin in a mass battle, it's a bad micro. At the same time, if player doesn't spare his skills to kill roamer who is solo, knowing that he is able to kill him, it's a different story. But as for me, this point relates more to previous aspects of micro, about which I've told you before. So let's summarize. As a result, all this knowledge, and by the way, I don't exclude that my list isn't complete, will allow you to better realize yourself and determine where you are after your micro. You're either in the tavern on a chill, or you're destroying turrets at the enemy base after which you in the match. In general, try to analyze everything. After all, only experience is decisive here, and the better you get involved in the process, the faster you develop. When you play with one hand and eat with the another, doing it without fork by the way, you aren't learning and developing at such moment. So before you start calling yourself a half-god or a half-cyber sportsman in 10,000 games, think carefully. Now let's find out what macro game or macro control is. Here, as in the previous case, we aren't limited to rotations on the battlefield. Macro is strategic long-term decisions that are based on your conclusions. The first component of macro is hero picking before the match, when you base your picking on what heroes are already in the enemy team. For example, when you think which hero to pick against Tamus to counter him on the lane and in general not to be useless in the match against other enemy heroes. By the way, tell me your options who do you counter this hero, it will be very interesting to see. Macro is also when you decide which battle spell to choose, for example, against Atlas when you took Marksman, and in general, what Marksman is better to take against Atlas to have less problems with him. In addition, I relate to macro an early understanding of what items you will need in any case. For example, if you have Clint against you, you 100% need Dreadnought armor, or playing against Sylvana, you should equip Winter Truncheon to survive her ultimates and so on. And in the match itself, macro also touches on the topic of builds. For example, when enemy marksman has Wind of Nature and you also play marksman, you need to equip this item too in order to correctly exchange your capabilities for his and win at the crucial moment. Either when playing roamer or explainer against those who on the first level have decent heal or spam shields, you have to realize that the first item which has to be equipped is Dominance Ice and not Windtalker instead. But the most basic part of the macro game or macro control is still your rotations across the battlefield, as well as the decisions they entail. It's like some kind of art to anticipate certain situations and outplay the enemy. It's like playing chess. This is pure strategy. Here are some simple examples. When you stand on the side lane until the second minute, usually by this time an enemy jungler and mid laner ganks one of the lanes, you can easily read what the lane will be ganked. It's enough to see which buff the enemy jungler started with. And knowing about the easiest route on the type red buff creep, walkie grass, blue buff creep, it will be clear to you that the bot lane will be ganked. If, for example, you miss this point and you play solo, you can simply listen to the battlefield and understand where the enemy jungler is. I will give one more non-obvious example, which will help you better understand what the macro game is. For example, there are situations when you've lost 1-2 allies before the battle for the total, and in most cases the team that's outnumbered retreats and gives the total to the enemies. But in this case it's possible to act very differently, and for example, knowing the impossibility of such battle, just go straight out with the Romanian allies and gank the gold lane. Because an adequate marksman farms at his lane at the beginning of the game, but at the same time, if the marksman has a good macro, he is already standing in the bush and watching what happens next because he reads such rotations. That's why macro is like chess. There are a lot of examples of rotations, and I've also only recently started learning it because it's pretty important, especially when you want to boost your skill and rank. Now I will tell you how and when micro as well as macro affects your rank and why. Let's imagine your conditional path from warrior to mythic. On the ranks at a glance from warrior to grandmaster, micro isn't developed well and players often lose because they don't feel their capabilities, don't use their skills effectively, don't understand the positioning and so on. But that's obvious because beginners are playing here. Micro becomes more developed from epic to mythic rank. Some mistakes disappear, but some, less obvious, still remain. The situation with macro is a bit different. In some of the simplest forms, it starts to appear at ranks from epic and above. So, as you can see, to pass your way from warrior to mythic, the micro game is more important than the macro, because it will allow you to outplay your enemies and win matches more often. In fact, everything makes perfect sense. First you learn how to press buttons, and only then you think how to outplay. So first you bring your micro to the proper level, and then you begin improving the macro. When reaching mythic rank and beyond, players find that most understand the micro game at a good enough level. And here, in order to win more often, you must have some other advantages and play not only with your hands, but also with your head. At this moment, your macro becomes extremely important. And guys, you should realize one more point. The player with the perfect micro can rank up to about 1000 mythic points. The player with the perfect macro can rank up as high as he wants. So guys, that's all. Develop, try and win, especially since you know what to pay attention to. Hugs to everyone and see you later. You know, I missed one thing. In theory, everything is good, but in practice, we shouldn't forget about our random teammates.